What is happening, everybody, man? Thank you guys tuning in to episode 304 of Expert Mentors Live, and got the one and only Mr. Joel Perso back in the house. What is happening, brother?
What's up, Coach? Happy to be here.
Man, so we got to talk about this secret sauce that you've got dialed in for, today. You're, feeling good, rocking and rolling. I can't wait for you to reverse engineer and, share that secret with me. Definitely anything to improve.
I'll let you know what I figure out. I don't know why, but today's a good day.
Yeah, it's wild. Sometimes, that level of self-awareness. Sometimes, we're feeling good, but we don't reflect on, what's triggered it, what's caused it, how did the morning go? What was the routine? How did we, shut down yesterday? Like all of those things. And, just a lot right now, I think, getting into such a headspace, and especially as we're going to dive into, agent productivity, and you and I have some strong beliefs both around, agent productivity and, how it, kind of what it looks like, especially the bigger you get, bigger organizations. But man, how tough, the market is, how tough things are right now. So the mindset in obviously Mr. Sloan kicking us off last month in Cleveland at Agent to CEO, on the mindset side of things. And it just really has resonated with me just in sideline conversations and everything that he's talked about. And, everything traces back down to, he's like, listen, I've never had an agent that hasn't doubled their production when they take their fitness seriously, and kind of the body element. And so when I get into the body element, it's, to me, I can wrap a lot of things in there, right? I can wrap, the physical, getting to the gym. I can wrap, getting the cardio, getting that in, which is a recharge, emotionally. I can wrap, the saunas, the steam rooms, the cold plunges. I can, wrap nutrition, the diet, water intake, also the mindfulness side of things. You start to wrap all of that into body. And I can easily see, to his point, throughout his career, he's like, I've never in my entire career have had an agent that when they focus and prioritize their body, that their business doubles. And so I know we're going to get into, agent productivity today, but I think that's got to be a massive element to the productivity, in kind of how you're prioritizing, the four equities, like Blake likes to talk about, with body being, balance and business.
Yeah, I love it. That's not specifically on my list, but that's definitely a common theme in the teams that I've been kind of studying, and where today came from is you have a team leader leading from the front with their health and fitness. And there's a trickle down effect into a business when you have a team leader doing that. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And I mean, it goes back to the first rule of leadership, right? Lead by example. And so, obviously you got somebody like Blake, right? He's leading in that charge. But he's also not in production. So I think it's, when we look at these small, mid-sized teams, when we get into, kind of our last conversation here, when we talked about kind of the business models into the future, kind of the 5 business models that you're seeing, that you're kind of predicting, with the magic, the crystal ball, of course, out, the business models moving into the future. You got in production, out of production, or the ATM, model, highly leveraged models, but still in production. But when you get out of production and then you're leading, I still think there's ways that you can, set the standard, if you will, even if you're not in production.
Yeah, I totally agree. Whether that's, consistency from a leadership perspective, whether it's making sure that there's high accountability, whatever you're focused on, you're accountable to your results, and that's, shared with the team. I think that's spot on. So the idea for talking about agent productivity came from a couple things. Blake was one of them in Cleveland at Agent to CEO, but I'm seeing 2 very extreme things happening right now in the masterminds I'm a part of and just the communities that I'm a part of. One is there's a ton of people just saying some version of, man, it's really hard out there right now. Mm-hmm. So that's on one side. And then on the other side, there are teams succeeding in a way that we've never seen before in real estate. 1,000, 2,000 plus transactions, teams recruiting agents, growing to hundreds of agents. We're seeing mergers. So how can both of these things be true, right? How can we have so much noise out there about how difficult things are? And I don't want to minimize that for people who are really struggling right now. There are forces at play that make it harder than it was before, right? I'm certainly pretending that that's not true. But how do we have those two things coexisting? It's really hard out there. We're struggling, and we're seeing teams, and not just one or two, right? But like the entire top of the team nationally with all brokerages succeeding it to a level that we've never seen before in the industry. I mean, I remember when in the NAEA mastermind days, it was like, all right, everybody was pretty much hitting 100 transactions. That was kind of minimum for that group. A bunch of us were at 2. You coached us all the way up to 4. Maybe 1 or 2 in that group over the years were at 500. I know you guys were, you and Jay were at 500, but man, I can't think of anybody, maybe Jeff Cook, maybe the guys from Canada who ever hit, close to 1,000. And now we're seeing that hit, regularly 600, 700, 800 to 1,000 more transactions. It's a different level. So talking about productivity, it came from that 2 things that I'm seeing, and kind of how do those things exist. Then I said, all right, well, let me look at, what are the common denominators for those teams at the top. And so I'm going to lay it out, and then maybe we can get into it. You can poke some holes in it. You can say, agree, disagree, but there's 2 things that overwhelmingly popped out from the teams that I'm seeing, hit that 1,000 mark, or the teams that are growing really fast. They're going from 50 to 200 to 400, really quickly. The same principle here for the ones that are growing fast. So I'll lay the 2 out, and then I'll talk about a little bit too of kind of control the controllables and where we can focus on within the team. So the only 2 things that are true of every single one of these massive teams that are succeeding at a high level with high agent productivity. Remember, there are certainly 200 agents, and yeah, we can do 1,000 deals with 200, 300 agents, right? That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about productivity, right? And the 2 things are a focus on recruiting and a focus on standards. Everything else across these top, maybe 10 or 15 teams that I know fairly intimately, everything else is a little bit different. They don't have the same lead generation sources. They don't have the same markets. They don't have the same average sale price, but they all have a focus on recruiting. They all have standards. There's no exceptions to that. And so boiling it down again, at the risk of oversimplifying, when we talk about agent productivity, what are we going to focus on if we want to improve that in our team? It's recruiting and it's standards.
Define agent productivity.
Yeah. So for me, however you want to specifically do it, but how many deals are your agents doing?
Okay.
So, and that might what it means to be productive might be different, right? Kyle Whistle in San Diego with an average sale price of, I don't know, 800,000, 6 deals is their minimum, right? So it's like, all right, you're considered a productive agent if you did more than 6 deals, because that probably translated to 6 million in volume. My team, when we had in Milwaukee, it was 24 was the goal, and 18 was the minimum. So how fast can we get you up to that 18? So it's going to be a little different, but it's agent productivity is about how many deals you're doing.
I would agree. And everything really feeds off of, that average sales price. And it has to be taken into consideration with that. And it's just from, human behavior, I think is a critical component that goes in there, right? Financial needs are met. You got to have a greater purpose. And especially when you get into, larger organizations to where, the game really flips, right? If you have the small, we all were pushing for that small Navy SEAL unit, but it's like, you got to build the Navy before you can have the Navy SEALs. Yeah. And so, constantly keep pushing. But, in our market, and when you look at kind of like Lawton, we found our wheelhouse with about 10 agents, but that was only, keep in mind, only about 3,000 total sides in a 12-month, a calendar 12-month period that we would experience in the marketplace. So if you had, 10, we were doing right around our sweet spot was 275 to 300 with 10 agents. That's where we were the most profitable. That's where, lead flow was adequate enough. So that's where we felt, kind of, the average there, but we would back out company generated for our listing agent, which was Stace. Stace was doing 60 deals, right? We had another market that was kind of, the expansion market before that was even a thing. She did 60 deals. So there's 120 out of, the 300. And then that left the other 8 agents. So what does that math, kind of equate out to? But I do agree with you 100%. A focus on recruiting. And that was the number one thing that we never solved that riddle. We never solved that riddle in Lawton. Now, when we went to Texas, we had to, right? But, we changed the offer, we changed the model. Therefore, the value proposition changed. When we went to partner, we went to market service areas, we went to territories. I mean, agents were writing us $10,000 checks to lock down a market service area, and we were chopping up market service areas so we could add more agents, right? That we solved that riddle. So productivity based upon market, whatever you defined. So let's unpack the two things. Let's unpack recruiting and let's unpack standards.
Yeah. So starting with recruiting, a couple reasons why these two things pair really well together, because there's a like in the top component and there's kind of an out the bottom component. And so recruiting is the in the top component. Two main reasons why it's super important. We just, if we want to grow and we want to specifically focus on productivity, we have to be constantly bringing in new talent. And so we're going to look for A players. One of the mistakes we make with teams sometimes is we think we need to find unicorns, but we're not looking for unicorns, right? You'll find one or two. I think in the 40 agents that we had in our team over a couple of years, we had 2 unicorns who were just gonna massively outproduce the rest of the field. But we're looking for A players. And so there's two main reasons why it's so important to be recruiting A players. One is you're just obviously going to bring that productivity. They're going to have a higher chance of success. But it also just raises the bar for the rest of the organization. If you've got 10 agents on your team and you've had the same 10 agents for the last 2 years, and you bring in 2 new agents who are fired up, ready to go and want to get after it, it challenges everybody else. So when you bring in great people to your organization, it raises the bar for the entire organization. And that's just a leadership principle. That's true everywhere. If we've got 3 salespeople, in my company, and we bring in a 4th who's a rock star, it raises the bar for everybody. If I've got 5 VAs on my team running marketing and we bring in a new one who's a rock star, it raises the bar for everybody. So we always want to be thinking about raising the bar for the entire organization. But we have to be putting top of funnel in with recruiting, because again, we're going to get to the standards and why we're going to lose some people out the bottom. So we have to be consistently focused on recruiting. I always tell people right now, like there's nothing that would happen in your business where you would stop lead generating, right? Like you know intuitively that if you stop lead generating, whatever that means for you, like you're not going to make it. And if you're trying to grow a team and grow a productive team, same thing for recruiting. There's nothing that should happen that should ever make you stop recruiting. That doesn't mean it's always going to be the main focus. It doesn't mean that's where the majority of your time is going to go. There has to be a consistent focus. We should be generating new recruiting leads, just like we're generating new buyer seller leads. So it has to be in the top. The reason these two things are paired together is because, and I think why a lot of people are afraid of recruiting is because if you don't have the standards in place, you're worried about collecting a whole bunch of unproductive agents. And that's certainly a danger if you only choose one of these two things. You can't get there. It really has to be both. And so consistently putting quality agents into the business and raising productivity that way. Not everybody's going to make it, of course, because we're going to have our standards and talk about that. But the ones who make it are going to elevate the agent productivity. So we want to raise our deals per agent, bring in more agents who are going to hit that mark. And then because of our standards, we're getting rid of the agents who aren't going to hit that mark. And so
Yeah.
that's how we raise productivity. We'll talk a little bit at the end about how do we focus on getting our existing team to do more deals. That's certainly worthwhile, but that's not the only lever to pull, and it can't be. If you say I want to get everybody on my team from averaging 1 deal a month to averaging 4 deals a month, it's just not going to happen, right? You have to be recruiting.
100%. And so I think, the combination there, recruiting will force the people that you have to raise their standard, or competition's coming through the door. Their replacement is coming through the door. And so I think that's the difference in, okay, what is productive versus what is busy, right? Getting the result, but what is the result? What is the desired outcome that we want? So I just did a quick search. So everybody has an expiration. So I think it's important to remember this, right? We recruit somebody, we think they're going to stay with us forever, right? And so the average ownership of an NFL franchise, the average ownership is about 40 years. Okay. So put this thing into perspective, because I think this correlates really, really well, right? So the average time of somebody owns a franchise in the NFL is about 40 years. Do you know the average expectancy? What is the average career of an NFL player?
Oh gosh, 4 years.
3.3 years. So that's the exact same thing in real estate, right? You have your career, right? Average is 40, right? Let's say it is what it is. So your average team member is only going to be with you for 3.3 years. So you constantly have to be looking for talent and bringing talent in. Now, do you have the Aaron Rodgers? Do you have the Tom Brady's? Do you have, the Vinny Testaverdes? Do you have the Joe Flacco's? Of course. But you got the guys that burn out after a year, that burn out after 2 years. That's why the average is the average, because there are only, there's only one Tom Brady, right? So like you just have to look. It just made me think in the NBA right now, right? Westbrook's in season 18, LeBron's 20 something seasons in, KD's, almost 20 seasons in, right? But those guys, but the average in the NBA is 4.5 years. So you're going to have turnaround. Everybody has an expiration. That's why you constantly have to be looking for talent, always bringing in talent.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, Joel, is that we go through seasons of life. And so we never, when we went independent, came back in Lawton, when we found our sweet spot, we knew the model, we had it dialed in, right? We were executing strategy. We had the value, we knew our value proposition, CHSA, CHBA, and we had a clear financial model, thanks to Greg Crabtree. We didn't lose anybody to competition. We lost them because of a season of life. They were relocating to a new area. They were relocating to a new city. They were moving out of the state. So when that happens, what do? Right? And we talk about this in leadership. The second that you need a leader, it's too late. You got to be building and developing leadership along the way. It's the same thing we're doing with Jim and Leanne right now, right? We're building the leadership bench, and we've been mindful about this for 24 months. And I think that's just such a critical component, is that, I think it's more of a mindset. Let's go back to mindset. Like we even talked this entire conversation. You got to have the mindset knowing that nobody's going to stay with you forever. And so you've got to constantly build a lead generation system for talent. And so that has to be at the forefront.
Yeah, and that mindset shift is really hard to make when you're a leader who pours into people and genuinely cares about them, genuinely invests your time and energy and and care for them, and then they leave for whatever reason, right? That's hard, but you have to make that. One of the reasons we talk a lot about, you and I, of your team's not your family, is your family's stuck for life. Like the team's going to come and go. So even sticking with your analogy here of the NFL franchise, like people are going to come and go. That's okay. And that leads right into the next piece, which is the standards. So all right, if we're a team, we're a pro sports team, we're not a family. That means everybody has to perform.
Yeah.
And that's where the standards come in. So again, has to be both. Has to be recruiting and standards. Recruiting is going to bring people in the top. Standards are going to move people out the bottom. And what that means is whoever's left is above standard, and that means productive by definition, because we've set the standard to be a certain level of production, right? At the very least, we've set a minimum activity level. And there's plenty of successful teams in certain models, right, that don't have standards, and because they're not focused on agent productivity, they're focused on agent count. And that's fine. There's a way to do that successfully, right? But most of the teams that I deal with and that I see, they are focused on productivity. They don't want to have 20 great producers and 80 bad producers. They want to have 50 solid producers, right? So most teams, and I get it, there's a lot of satisfaction to helping people succeed, creating really good jobs where people can make incredible incomes, take care of their families. A lot of us started a team to help people accomplish that, right? So it makes sense that people want to focus on it. So you don't have to have standards, but if you don't have standards, you can't tell me that agent productivity is important to you, and that's okay. Right. But those two things cannot coexist.
That's such a great distinction. I'm 100% with you. And like, listen, I come from the side of belief that you can ratchet up agent productivity. That is my belief. I think there's a diminishing return. I think that's where you can kind of push standards a little bit further, and the accountability side, the standard will take care of itself, but then the culture starts to police it as well. Yeah. And I remember we made such a hard push with, and then obviously with technology and we can do some other things, but 2.2 per month per agent was the hardest that I could ever get it. And I'm talking like micromanage. And it just, that's what I mean. It wasn't worth the amount of time and energy and effort that was put in place to take it from 1.8 to 2.2. It wasn't worth it. It at the end of the day, it wasn't worth it. Set the standard, let the culture police itself, and then constantly keep bringing other, possible talent in the door. And there was something in there that you had said that I was thinking about. Oh, two things. One, back to Tina and her 6 P's to purpose. Reason I love it is that she created a visual roadmap and she put 10 years to it. Yeah. And so if you're not where you want to be, it's because you just haven't had enough time and temperature, right? You haven't had enough intensity and enough time to get you to where it is that you want to be. What I love about it, the thing that I saw immediately, is that she just took the NFL player from 3.3 to probably 6.4, right? She just increased the lifespan of your team member by showing them a visual roadmap, right? KW has the future pacing, or the future whatever it's called, to where you can kind of career whatever the heck they call it, but it's basically you start to see kind of the progression in the next stages and the next steps in the direction you go. That's why we know 3 to 5 years agents, that's when they start to see more business coming to them, because they've got a good book of business. They've been really diligent. They've got a good, visual mindset in the marketplace. So business starts to come to them, and they're not chasing as hard, or team members aren't taking advantage of company generated opportunities. They're bringing more deals to the table at about that point. And then depending upon who's in their circle is going to determine what they're listening to determine what the next step is. I also think there's some assessments that can also determine if somebody's going to hang in there with you longer than not. My default back to is the predictable success quiz from Les McCowan. And what we found is the agents that were visionary, that were a D personality, they were going to leave you, because that was an indicator that they were more entrepreneurial than anything else, than doers, right? So I think there's some assessments that you can get a gauge on people to determine kind of life expectancy within the organization. And listen, if I got a visionary and a high D driver, and I know they're only going to be with me for 3 years and they're going to suck everything out, I'm good with it now, because we have these cloud-based brokerage models. We have EXP to where, like, let's go.
Absolutely. Go grow your own team. Yeah, absolutely do. Yep. There's a graduation aspect to that I love. I think you hit on something really important that I was going to get to, but let's get to it now, which is like, you guys were world class at getting people up to that, 1.5 deals, 1.5 deals a month really quickly. Like, you guys were great at that, right? Then you guys were one of the best teams, in the country at the time, probably. So that pushed it up to that 1.8. And then, like you said, you just were absolutely, beating your head against the wall, drowning yourself trying to get it up to above 2. Mm-hmm. So the focus on agent productivity from your existing team, your onboarding process, your training, what leads are you providing, your support, that's valuable. I'm not saying that stuff doesn't matter and that doesn't impact productivity, but that's going to get you from 0 to 1 deal a month. That stuff maybe gets you a little bit higher, but after that, it's all about, do those people want to go higher? And then again, now we're back to recruiting and standards, finding more of the people who want to go higher than that, and then either maintaining or raising the minimum standard. So everything else that we talk about traditionally with your value proposition, your agents, that stuff still matters, but that stuff does not get you to a team that averages 3 deals a month. That gets you a team that averages 1 deal a month, which in most markets isn't terrible, right? You can run a profitable team on that in most areas of the country. But again, if we want to go higher than that, we have to push out the bottom and we have to bring in the top. So it still gets back to recruiting and standards, because the focus on agent productivity from within the team, again, it's important, but it's not enough.
Yeah.
And the danger of that too, and we were there on our team until we got really clear about standards, which you helped us with when you were coaching us back in the NAEA days. It's exhausting trying to drag somebody up to a minimum standard, right? You can't. So I'm not saying it's a sink or swim thing. We're not tossing people into the deep end. We're providing value. We're providing resources, support. Like, everybody has what they need to survive and succeed on the team. But man, we just exhaust ourselves trying to drag people there, instead of saying, "Here, you have everything you need. If you're stuck somewhere, let me help you get unstuck. If we need to focus on your skill level or whatever it is, like, yeah, I'm here for you, but I can't pull you along to success." And that's why the standards are so important, because then again, another danger there is you end up spending all your time with your bottom 20% instead of your top 20%. And when you spend your time with your top 20%, you get incredible returns in the business. Something that you taught me, a piece that I had missed of this, is like, that not only is the top 20% going to succeed more because you're investing in them, but they're going to invest in the middle and help bring up the middle. And that was such a big get for me that you shared. Yeah. But if you don't have the standards to get rid of the bottom 20%, that's where you end up spending your time, and it slows everything down, or on more extreme cases, tanks the whole business.
Right, 100%. And I think sometimes we have this belief that people don't want to pour into other people, and that's the whole plus, minus, and equal concept, right? From Frank Shamrock. And we're most of the time when they come in, we're the plus, and then you get them into that the middle mark, or even in your top 20%. The minus is the people below them, or the newer agents coming in. And sometimes, and I struggled with this for a long time. It's like, man, how do I compensate them? But sometimes you don't have to compensate them, because as if we're of high character, high trust, we're of our value, of value fit, value alignment, most people want to pour back into other people. They want the opportunity to give back. That's just kind of how we're wired. Yeah. And so I think just even offering an opportunity to train, opportunity to mentor, just like, do you want to reward them? Of course, but you don't have to. That was the biggest get for me, is like, I thought that you had to compensate somebody for them to want to pour into another human. And that is just not true. Yeah. And that was just a limiting belief that I had to, poke the hole in to pop. And so you just kind of create the space to where they can give back. And then obviously the equal, right? Everybody needs that accountability partner that's going to push each and every day. That's absolutely critical. And so I think, being able to look at it in that regard is key. And I love the standard aspect of you got to draw a line in the sand. And the reason is that A players don't want to hang out with C and D players. Like Eagles don't want to hang out with Ducks. And if you're creating a culture of Ducks, your Eagles are going to leave. And so they have to understand that there's a path, but that there's an exit. And if you're not performing, you're going to exit, because that allows the A players to shine even more and believe. That's belief, right? Believe in what the organization is doing. Believe in the vision that you have, knowing that, you're going to get rid of, the people that are slowing down, robbing resources, not showing up, not plugging in, that, like you said, are being dragged. And I don't want to drag anybody. You don't want to drag anybody, right? Like, no way. And so I think that's super important to keep in mind as you kind of going through and designing. But like, listen, this isn't for everybody. It's like you said, right? Like, if you don't have a standard, the meet them where they're at. Okay, meet them where they're at. But as long as they meet the damn standard, then I'll meet you where you're at. But I'm not going to, allow you to rob resources and pull away from, our top 20%, because you're not willing to do the work or hold the line or do what's required to take advantage of this opportunity.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think, so I highlighted, again, a lot of things we're not talking about this call, right? We're not talking about onboarding processes. We're not talking about lead generation. We're not talking about coaching and kind of the more traditional value proposition. And the reason for that is because I don't see people getting stuck there. Like most teams are not stuck with lead generation, and that's why they can't grow. Most teams are not stuck because they don't have a good enough, TC process to support their agents, or good enough marketing to support their agents, right? They're getting stuck on the recruiting and standards, and that's why I wanted to focus on it. But kind of getting back to within the team itself. All right, we want to be more productive. How do we go kind of that 0 to 1 transactions a month type of thing? Really what you need to focus on with your existing agents then, and I think maybe the only two things you can actually control are its activity and skill. So again, just breaking it down to two things. I almost never see a team that's trying to grow failing because of a lack of leads. It's almost always a lack of conversion. And that comes down to two things. It's just activity and skill. So skill is more important. I feel like there's a few years where everybody kind of stopped talking about the importance of being a skilled agent. And now we're seeing that, creep back in. And the teams that never stopped training, that never stopped role playing, that never stopped, testing out on a listing presentation or a buyer presentation. Those are the teams that don't have a skill issue right now. But a lot of teams do have a skill issue right now because it wasn't a focus the last 5 years. So skill, if you can get your conversion rate from conversation to appointment up a little bit, if you can get your conversion rate from appointment to contract up a little bit, and if you can get your conversion rate from contract to closing table up a little bit, there's massive returns for you. So skill matters. It always has, but it's back to mattering a lot more than it used to. And then it's activity, right? Like I said, it's almost never the amount of leads. It's almost always conversion of those leads. And the way we convert leads is higher activity. Yeah. So that's where you can focus. If you're like, all right, yeah, I know I got to do recruiting and standards, but I love my people. I got A players, right? I just want to help them. It's activity and skill. And so you have to build those things into your standards. It's not unreasonable to have a standard of a certain amount of role playing, or attending a team meeting, attending a training, attending coaching calls, whatever it is. Those are perfectly reasonable things to make part of your standard. You have to come in this many days a week or month. We're going to role play as a team. You have to come in for team meeting where we're going to do training. Again, those can be parts of the standard. And then you need to decide, and maybe the answer is both, between an activity standard and a results standard. So activity, I think, is great when you're working with newer agents. That's what we can control. We can control our activity. So there's going to be a minimum number of calls, or even better, conversations. If there's one metric that we see leads to success, and again, what most of the top teams that I'm seeing and working with are focused on is conversations. Most of them have a definition for it. So it could be something like, a conversation longer than 2 minutes about real estate with, with a prospect who could buy or sell with you, something like that, right? But have a definition of it, and then how many conversations are we having? But there has to be an activity. There has to be an activity metric and standard, and then I recommend, as you get comfortable with having activity standards, then at some point we have to bring in a result standard. You can start off with that standard being kind of low if it makes you nervous, but there has to be, eventually people have to do deals to be here, or what are we doing here, right? Because then again, they're taking up resources, time, energy, money, leads, desk space, and not producing a result. So at some point there has to be a results standard. That everybody should start with an activity standard.
I agree. So on, two things on standard, and then I just want to kind of echo a lot of the things that you said, just give a little more color to it, to a couple things. I go back to one of the best one-liners I've ever heard, right? In Vegas, I think you and Dan were up at the front of the room, and we were talking about standards, and he said one of the best lines I've ever heard, right? The only standards you have are the standards you enforce. That has stuck with me for better part of a decade, just because that is so true. And it's like, let's go to the whistle way, right? 12 months, don't close 6 deals. If you close 5, you're gone. I don't care how big of a cheerleader. I don't care how big of a contributor. I don't care, if, you're funding something for us, a lead generation deal. The standard is the standard. You close 6 deals or you're gone, period. To that point, I think there's a ramping period, right? I think there's a 30, 60, 90. That would be the activity standards. But there's also got to be a result at the 6-month mark. I think for Kyle, are you 2 deals in, right? At 6 months? Because we know from building the call center with the ISAs that, on target earnings, right, is what we would always talk about, is that we knew ramping a new ISA or ramping a new agent, if their goal, right, was, let's just use simple math, 10 deals, we know probably 80% of the deals are going to happen in the second 6 months than the first 6 months, right? Because you're building, you're ramping, you're building the pipeline, your conversations, you're learning, you're developing the skill set, you're developing the confidence. So you're going to do more in the second 6 months than the first 6 months. So there's the path, right? But I think you give points along the way of, you got to meet this, or this is not going to work for you.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I really truly believe why agents and team leaders are scared to hold a standard is because they don't have a recruiting process.
Yeah.
If they could recruit people, they would hold a tight standard. Yeah. The reason they don't hold a tight standard is because they don't have a recruiting process.
Yeah. Spot on.
So I love the activity and skill. So two voids in the industry. We've been talking about it, but we got away from it because there was a tailwind in the market, but now we're back into a full headwind. Leadership, skill. There's the 2 voids in the entire industry. There's a leadership gap, and then there's a skill gap. I agree with you most of it on the conversations. Sloan changed my thinking on this. And the reason is that it's not 1, it's 3. You got to have proteins, carbs, and fats. You got to have the macros. So because, and he gave me a great example, because you and I were leaning into the year 4 Ds of execution. We got one number, we got conversations. And he's like, listen, if I just focus on conversations, but I don't ask for the business, I'm going to be hitting my main metric, but I ain't getting closer to the result. I'm like, dang, yes, you're right. So obviously marketing is helping eyeballs to the page, and then getting opt-ins, getting sign-ins, getting the leads, right? So we're talking about ads. We're talking about also picking up the phone, cold calling. If you're running Zillow, you're running realtor.com, you're running homes.com, you're running all of these other things, those are agency, right? Let's go back to core 4 and lead getters from Hermosis 4 and 4. All Zillow Flex, all that's just agency, right? Because you have that's a lead getter. You have your clients, your past clients, you have your vendors, you have your team members. they're all bringing you deals, but the other one is agency. Zillow's just an agency. That's all it is, because you're paying a hefty 30, 40, even at EXP, you got Revenos. That's an agency. You're paying 50% on those deals, 51% on those deals. So you have that, but marketing is helping get the opportunity. So there's conversion points there. What we're talking about is conversion on the sales component, right? So lead to conversation, 100%. You got to be measuring that. Conversation to appointment, you got to be measuring that. And then appointment to signed, you got to be measuring that. That to me, that falls in the conversion bucket, especially on the sales component.
Yeah.
And then once it's signed, then it is a skill thing, because it's skill in pricing and it's skill in negotiation, right? And then you got to negotiate to be able to get the price, and that works on listings and buyers, but that's a skill set. But I think if we're talking about our main conversion, I think you're spot on. I think the biggest bottleneck, is conversion. Conversion on recruits and conversion on leads generated opportunities. So I think for most people, I think you're spot on. Probably more than 80%. Herbie for these teams. Where would you say percentage wise where Herbie's at? You would say Herbie's on conversion. What percent of these teams would you say that Herbie's conversion?
Yeah, of these top teams that are experiencing this kind of success, I think Herbie's moved back to recruiting, because they've nailed all these other pieces. Some of them it took years, right? It's not like it was easy. They've nailed all this other stuff, maintaining the standards, again, all delivering the value, and so it's back to recruiting is the bottleneck of how fast can we grow, how many people who meet our ideal, agent profile can we get in the door. Mm-hmm. For everybody else outside of the, top 5% of those teams who are crushing it, everybody else sits in conversion. I mean, everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I know we're kind of dancing all over the place here, but just thinking about Lawton, right? And I know Lawton, less than 200 licensed agents, only 28 agents actually did transactions. So we would always let ourselves off the hook by saying talent pool is too short, right? So we're better off increasing revenue through other activities, which we did, right? That we, raise transaction fees, charge 4%, charge 7%, charge, up the transaction fee, making sure we're getting, money from every vendor. We're out flipping houses. We're doing developments, new construction, starting other businesses, doing other things. But if I had to solve recruiting, right? And so speaking to small markets right now, listening to this, and you're like, man, that's my market, man. I got no agents. If you had to solve it, gun against head, you had to solve recruiting, how would you do it? I know how we would have started the real estate school. We wouldn't have recruited. We would have built new agents. That's what we would have done. We just had the real estate school. And, Stacy and Reedy went down that path, but they, let up on it. If we had to solve recruiting in a small town, the only way that I believe is that you create agents. That's what we did when there was no inventory. We just went and started a development, made our own product. We made homes. So I think it's just a little bit of a different mindset, and not letting yourself off the hook, and kind of gun against head. If you had to solve it, how would you solve it? If your life depended upon it, you're not going to get to see your kids. Like Joel, you're never going to see Wes again if you don't solve this. I promise you'll solve it. I guarantee you will solve it. And I think that's just the mindset that we have to have heading into the future, a little bit more challenging, and really, instead of being reactive, being more strategic. I know that was the tipping point for us, to where we started to unlock everything is when we got strategic.
I love it. And for anybody listening who you're an agent on your own right now, you don't have a team, maybe you're not even thinking about a team, but you want to become more productive, the principle is the same. It's activity and skill. And then if you're really serious, have a standard for yourself, right?
Yeah. It's so good, man. And you talked about, hey, we're gonna commit to trainings. I'm in the top 20%. I don't need trainings anymore. Well, let me give you a path to where you can get out of showing up for training every day, but I'm also going to flip the script and give you an opportunity to lead those trainings every day. You know what I mean? So I'm going to still keep you plugged in, but I'm just going to change the dynamic a little bit to keep you energized.
Maybe instead of having attend every week, you need to teach once a month or something like that. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
great.
There's always a way. There's always a way. But I love grounding it. It's super simple: recruiting and standards, activity and skill. And obviously, if we're not moving in a known direction, this doesn't matter. And what are we doing this for? Right? Like what is it? And I love I love Brett Jennings, breakdown on this. 3 or 4 years ago, I think Brett was the first $1 billion. He was the first one that I heard that did $1 billion, right? We've all chased these different milestones, right? It was get to 100 transaction. It was get to $1 million in GCI. It was get to, 500 transactions. It was get to, 1,000 transactions, get to $1 billion in production, right? And he was the first one, to get to $1 billion in production. And I remember, this is when I had just moved back up to Oklahoma City. I mean, I know exactly. I pulled the car over, was sitting in the parking lot talking to Brett, and he hit the BHAG, and he knew what was coming. Right? I said, "What's next? What's right? You accomplish a major milestone. The worst thing that we can do is not immediately reset the goal." And he started laughing. He goes, "I knew you were going to ask me that." And then it was to create 100 millionaires. He wanted to help 100 agents within his company hit $1 million in GCI. Wow. How awesome is that? To be able to help 100 agents in your company achieve $1 million in GCI, which we were all used to be chasing as a team to hit $1 million in GCI. So it is pretty cool to have those big, hairy, audacious goals. But I think, recruiting and standards, only follow after a big vision. And when you have that big vision, I think then the only way to get there is to recruit and to have high standards.
Yeah. 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 Your vision's going to dictate a lot of how much or what kind of this stuff you have to do, but everybody has to do it, I think. Right. So,
yeah. So good, brother. Amazing as always. I got freaking page and a half of notes myself, and I really appreciate you jumping in here again with us and really, truly, embodying really what this whole expert mentor series has all, been about, and, 304 episodes deep, and we're still going. So pretty awesome, guys. Make sure you get connected with Joel. If you're looking for, fractional leadership, you're looking for anything to help you, navigate the growth in the terrains. Joel's amazing. More than qualified to jump in and help you take over and run your organization and help you get to that next level of what we're all trying to get to. So, brother, I appreciate you.
Thanks, Coach.
Awesome. Guys, stay tuned. We will catch you on the next episode, and talk to you guys soon. See ya.